What does perfect even mean? Is there even such a thing? Ooh, can we switch up all the rules and imagine a utopia?
The continuation of Anatomy of the Spirit. Part 1, A New Language of the Spirit. Energy, Medicine, and Intuition. Chapter 1. I disappoint some people when I discuss intuition because I firmly believe that intuitive or symbolic sight is not a gift but a skill based in self-esteem. Developing this skill and a healthy sense of self becomes easier when you can think in the words and concepts and principles of energy medicine. So as you read this chapter, think of learning to use intuition as learning to interpret the language of energy. The human energy field. Everything that is alive pulsates with energy, and all of this energy contains information. While it is not surprising that practitioners of alternative or complementary medicine accept this concept, even some quantum physicists acknowledge the existence of an electromagnetic field generated by the body's biological processes. Scientists accept that the human body generates electricity because living tissue generates energy. Your physical body is surrounded by an energy field that extends as far out as our outstretched arms and the full length of your body. It is both an information center and a highly sensitive perceptual system. We are constantly in communication with everything around us through this system, which is a kind of conscious electricity that transmits and receives messages to and from other people's bodies. These messages from and within the energy field are what intuitives perceive. Practitioners of energy medicine believe that the human energy field contains and reflects each individual's energy. It surrounds us and carries with us the emotional energy created by our internal and external experiences, both positive and negative. This emotional force influences the physical tissue within our bodies. In this way, your biography, that is, the experiences that make up your life, becomes your biology. Experiences that carry emotional energy in our energy systems include past and present relationships, both personal and professional, profound and traumatic experiences and memories, and belief patterns and attitudes, including all spiritual and superstitious beliefs. The emotions from these experiences become encoded in our biological systems and contribute to the formation of our cell tissue, which then generates a quality of energy that reflects those emotions. These energy impressions form an energy language which carries literal and symbolic information that a medical intuitive can read. Here's an example of the kind of message the energy field may communicate. Let's say you had some trouble with math when you were in elementary school. Knowing the fact that 12 makes a dozen would not ordinarily carry an emotional charge, as would alter the health of cell tissues. On the other hand, if you were humiliated by the teacher because you didn't know that fact, the experience would carry an emotional charge that would create cellular damage, especially if you were to dwell on that memory through adulthood or use it as a touchstone for determining how to deal with criticism or authority figures or education or failure. An intuitive might pick up the literal image of your exchange with the teacher or any other negative symbol linked to that experience. Positive images and the energy of positive experiences are also held in the energy field. Think of a time when someone praised you for a job well done, or kind act, or for some help you gave someone. You feel a positive energy, a surge of personal power within your body. Positive and negative experiences register a memory in cell tissue, as well as the energy field. As neurobiologist Dr. Candace Pert has proven, neuropeptides, the chemicals triggered by emotions, are thoughts converted into matter. Our emotions reside physically in our bodies and interact with our cells and tissues. In fact, Dr. Pert can no longer separate the mind from the body. She says because the same kinds of cells that manufacture and receive emotional chemistry in the brain are present throughout the body. Sometimes the body responds emotionally and manufactures emotional chemicals before the brain has registered a problem. Remember, for instance, how quickly your body reacts to a loud noise before you've had time to think. As Dr. Pert said on Bill Moyer's Healin' in the Mind, clearly there's another form of energy that we have not yet understood. For example, there's a form of energy that appears to leave the body when your body dies. Your mind is in every cell of your body. Moyers, you're saying that my emotions are stored in my body? Pert, absolutely. You didn't realize that? There are many phenomena that can't explain without going into energy. Read in the field. In addition to reading specific dramatic childhood experiences, sometimes an intuitive can even pick up on superstitions, personal habits, behavior patterns, moral beliefs, and preferences in music and literature. At other times, the energy impressions are more symbolic. For instance, for one patient who was suffering from tightness of breath, I kept receiving the symbolic impression of him being shot in the heart before a firing squad. Obviously, this had not literally happened to him. He had undergone intensive medical tests, which could locate no known physical cause for his condition. After I shared my impression with him, he told me that his wife had betrayed him several times with other men, and being shot through the heart was exactly how he felt about her actions. By admitting these emotions, which he had previously tried to ignore, he was able to address the problems both in his marriage and in his health. Our emotional energy converts into biological matter through a highly complex process. Just as radio stations operate according to specific energy wavelengths, each organ and system in the body is calibrated to absorb and process specific emotional and psychological energies. That is, each area of the body transmits energy on a specific, detailed frequency, and when we are healthy, all are in tune. An area of the body that is not transmitting at its normal frequency indicates the location of a problem. A change in intensity of the frequency indicates a change in the nature and seriousness of the illness and reveals the stress pattern that has contributed to the development of the illness. This way of interpreting the body's energy is sometimes called vibrational medicine. It resembles the most ancient medical practices and beliefs, from Chinese medicine to indigenous shamanic practices to virtually every folk or alternative therapy. The truth is that energy medicine is not new, but I believe my interpretation of it and how you can use it to heal spiritually in conjunction with contemporary medical treatments is unique. If a person is able to sense intuitively that he or she is losing energy because of a stressful situation and then acts to correct that loss of energy, then the likelihood that the stress developing into a physical crisis is reduced, if not eliminated completely. Well, I can parse the language of energy for you so that you can begin to see and feel the human energy field, begin to understand its corresponding spiritual anatomy, begin to know the source of your personal power, and begin to develop your own intuition. I have some trouble explaining exactly how I personally acquire energy information. Other intuitives appear to have the same difficulty, but we all pick up on information that has the strongest impulse, the most intensity. These impulses usually relate directly to the part of the body that has become weakened or diseased. As a rule, a person's energy system transmits only the information that is essential to bring the conscious mind to an awareness of the imbalance or disease. Like the shot in the heart, image symbolic information can sometimes be disturbing, but this intensity is necessary in order that the body's message can break through the habitual mental or emotional patterns that cause the disease to form in the first place. Medical intuitions cooperate with the body's intuition. Oh my god, I gotta drink. I lost my spot. Okay, I found it. As a rule, a person's energy system transmits only the information that is essential to bring the conscious mind to an awareness of the imbalance or disease. Like the shot in the heart image, symbolic information can sometimes be disturbing, but this intensity is necessary in order that the body's message can break through the habitual mental or emotional patterns that cause the disease to form in the first place. Medical intuitions cooperate with the body's intention to promote its own health and life. That is, our energy will always seek health, in spite of what we may do to ourselves physically. If, for example, we tell a lie, our energy field will often communicate to the other person the energy fact that we are not telling the truth. Energy does not and cannot lie. Stay with your first impression. When you receive an intuitive impression about yourself or the person you are reading, pay attention to whatever image comes up. Most people are looking for the safe intuitions, not healthy ones, and safe insights, not healthy insights, because they usually want a safe passage into the future, into the unknown. So you may be tempted to dismiss a disturbing image that you receive, or one that is not congruent with your own desires, or those of the person you are reading. Most people that come to me for an evaluation have already intuited themselves that something is wrong, but they are hoping that I will give that feeling some other meaning, such as, you're merely going through a natural body change, but nothing is wrong with you physically. But it is important to tell people the truth, not what they want to hear. Again and again, I have had to confirm the negative intuitive impressions of people seeking my help. Their abilities are as accurate as mine. These people know they are ill, but since I do not share their fear, my intuitions can interpret their data better than they can themselves. People must face what they fear. For instance, in the case of the man shot through the heart, it seemed on the surface safer to him to avoid confronting his adulterous wife with his suspicions that she was cheating on him. Instead of acting on his intuitions, he directed his hurt and anger underground into his body, which manifested eventually as his chest pains. His body and spirit were striving to wake him up to the need to deal with his wife's cheating, but as so many people do, he had hoped that by not confronting the problem it would go away. His body, however, revealed that the true cost of this safe approach was a challenge to his health. This man's story illustrates how powerful intuitions really are and how they can break through the most determined mindset to lead us toward healing. Life is painful at times, and spiritually, we are meant to face the pains that life presents. In the Western world, however, we often misrepresent God's plan for us and expect life to be comfortable and free of trouble. We measure God's presence in our lives by our level of personal comfort. We believe God is here if our prayers are answered, but neither God nor Buddha nor any other spiritual leader or tradition guarantees or encourages a pain-free life. Spiritual teachings encourage us to grow past and through painful experiences, each of which is spiritual lessons. Developing intuitive ability will help us learn the lessons inherent in our experiences. Have a reflective state of mind. There is no formula by which you can develop your intuition. Some people develop it through meditation or as a result of mastering a certain talent or sport. I have often heard people say that intuitive ability is the result of a spiritual lifestyle, but that is not accurate. Intuitive ability is present in everyone because it is a survival skill, not a spiritual intention. Maintaining a reflective or meditative attitude, however, facilitates your reception of intuitions. Objectively, will help you interpret the impressions you receive and put them into a symbolic spiritual context. Objectivity is key. I learned through experience to discern the difference between personal and impersonal impressions. My indicator of an accurate intuition is a lack of emotion. For me, a clear impression has no emotional energy connected to it whatsoever. If I feel an emotional connection to an impression, then I consider that impression to be contaminated. The person you are reading, however, will often feel some emotional charge from the impression you receive. For me, impressions are neither auditory nor visual. Rather, they are like quick mental images that contain very subtle electrical currents. As I scan someone's body, I focus on each energy center and wait for an image. After about 5 seconds, the imagery process starts, and it continues to unfold until it stops on its own. The duration varies from person to person. Reading some people requires almost an hour, while others take less than 10 minutes. Every now and again, I encounter a person whom I cannot read or help. I can only speculate on why this is so. A few times I was left with the feeling that nothing I said would make any sense to them, and at other times I had the impression the person was looking for only a very specific type of answer that I would not provide, such as why their marriage had failed. Also, I am virtually useless to anyone if I am exhausted or if something intensely personal is on my mind. As you learn to read the human energy system, your first step is to study the principles underlying the practice, and the next is to gain some practical experience. This book provides you with the theoretical concepts and some pointers in exploring your own intuitive abilities. In developing your skill and trying it out in your own life, however, you must trust your gut responses, a fact I cannot emphasize enough. The first principle: biography becomes biology. According to energy medicine, we are all living history books. Our bodies contain our histories. Every chapter, line, and verse of every event and relationship in our lives. As our lives unfold, our biological health becomes a living, breathing, biographical statement that conveys our strengths, weaknesses, hopes, and fears. Every thought you have had has traveled through your biological system and activated a psychological response. Some thoughts are like depth charges, causing a reaction throughout the body. A fear, for instance, activates every system of your body. Your stomach tightens, your heart rate increases, and you may break into a sweat. A loving thought can relax your entire body. Some thoughts are more subtle, and still others are unconscious. Many are meaningless and pass through the body like wind through the screen, returning no conscious attention, and their influence upon our health is minimal. Yet each conscious thought and many unconscious ones does generate a psychological response. All our thoughts, regardless of their content, first enter our systems as energy. Those that carry emotional, mental, psychological, or spiritual energy produce biological responses that are then stored in our cellular memory. In this way, our biographies are woven into our biological systems gradually, slowly, every day. The story of a young patient of Norm's is a good example of how this process works. Norm called me for a phone consultation on this patient, a dentist, who was not feeling well in general and was becoming increasingly exhausted. He had an acute pain around the right side of his abdomen, and he was also seriously depressed. Increasing and continual exhaustion that takes the edge off mental and emotional clarity is an energy symptom that indicates something is wrong in the body. Most people do not consider it a symptom because it is not actually painful, but when exhaustion continues, even when the person is getting more sleep, the body is trying to communicate that the person is energetically ill. Responding to this message at the energy stage can often prevent the development of an illness. Depression is another symptom that all is not well. Within the clinical world, depression is generally considered an emotional and mental disorder, but prolonged depression often precedes the development of the physical illness. In energy terms, depression literally is a release of energy, or life force, if you will, without consciousness. If energy is like money, depression is like opening your wallet and announcing, "I don't care who takes my money or how it is spent." Prolonged depression inevitably creates chronic exhaustion. If you don't care who spends your money or how much, inevitably you will end up broke. Just so, without energy, you cannot support your health. As Norm examined his dentist patient, he had the feeling that the man was developing an illness. Because of the man's abdominal pain, Norm ran tests for pancreatic cancer, but they came back negative, so he called me for a consultation. As is our habit, he gave me only the patient's name and age and said nothing about the pain or his own suspicions. In my own evaluation, I saw that the right side of his patient's body, around the pancreas, was generating toxic energy. I told Norm that this man was burdened by an enormous feeling of responsibility and that it had become a constant source of anguish for him. He felt intensely that he was unable to live as he wanted to, and he dwelled on this feeling almost to the exclusion of any other emotion. Obviously, we all have negative feelings, but not all negativity produces a serious physical illness. To create disease, negativity has to become the dominant emotion, as it did with this young dentist. After I'd shared this evaluation with Norm, I told him that the patient had pancreatic cancer. Norm admitted he had already suspected that disease, but the test came back all clear. He said goodbye and returned to his patient. He recommended to the dentist that he evaluate how well his life's work was serving him. More than likely, Norm said, he would have to make some changes to get what he wanted. The patient admitted that he wanted to leave dentistry, but he felt that he couldn't go into something else because of the impact his decision would have on his dependents. Norm didn't tell him that he had the energy frequency of pancreatic cancer, but he talked with him about his career frustrations and tried to tell him to shift his negative attitude. Unfortunately, the man wasn't able to act on Norm's advice. He defined responsibility as an obligation to care for others to the exclusion of himself, and he was unable to reconceptualize a life that included self-care and self-fulfillment as well. 2 weeks later, this young man's primary physician repeated the tests for pancreatic cancer. This time they proved positive. The man was operated on immediately, but he died within 4 months of his surgery. It sometimes takes a concerted effort to shift your mind to allow yourself to heal. While the dentist could not accept that his professional sadness and feeling of entrapment were a change in his body's chemistry and health, it was easier for others to recognize these patterns in him. Accepting the idea that every part of your life, from your physical history to your relationships to every attitude, opinion, and belief you carry inside yourself, affects your biological makeup is only part of the healing process. However, you also have to get that acceptance to move from the mental level into the physical level, into your body, to feel the truth viscerally and cellularly and believe it wholly. It is very easy to learn something new and apply that knowledge only casually. The idea that biography becomes biology implies that we participate to some degree in our creation of illness. But, and this is a crucial point, we must not abuse this truth by blaming ourselves or any patients for becoming ill. People rarely choose consciously to create an illness. Rather, illness develops as a consequence of behavioral patterns and attitudes that we do not realize are biologically toxic until we have already become so. Only when illness forces us to review our attitudes do we come close to comprehending that our day-to-day fearful or bitter attitudes are, in fact, biologically negative substances. Again, we all have negative feelings, but not all negativity produces disease. To create disease, negative emotions have to be the dominant, and what accelerates the process is knowing the negative thought to be toxic, but giving it permission to thrive in your consciousness anyway. For instance, you may know you need to forgive someone, yet you decide that remaining angry gives you more power. Remaining obsessively angry makes you more likely to develop a disease because the energy consequence of a negative obsession is powerlessness. Energy is power, and transmitting energy into the past by dwelling on painful events drains power from your present day body and can lead to illness. Power is essential for healing and for maintaining health. Attitudes that generate a feeling of powerlessness not only lead to low self-esteem, but also deplete the physical body of energy and weaken overall health. Thus, the next principle to explore is the primary significance of power for health. The second principle, personal power is necessary for health. One day, Norm called me to do an evaluation of a woman who was suffering from depression and chronic pain in her neck and lower back. Norm asked me if I felt that she would benefit from various electromagnetic treatments. I said, absolutely not. She hasn't enough power in her system to benefit from those devices. This was the first time I had ever commented on a person's power in relation to healing. Norm asked me to elaborate, and only then did I realize what I had just said. Suddenly, I had an entirely different sense of the human energy system as an expression of personal power. I explained to Norm that this woman's attitudes had caused her to lose power in her life. She felt inadequate, I said, was always looking for approval, and had a tremendous fear of being alone. Her self-esteem was based only on her ability to control others, primarily her children. Her fears and inadequacies are like a black hole, magnetically drawing everyone, particularly her children, towards it, only to crush them eventually. She continually criticizes her children in an attempt to keep them dependent upon her, since weak children find it difficult to leave the nest. She found flaws in their every accomplishment, whether scholastic or sports related, because she could not risk empowering them with emotional support, because controlling others requires a tremendous investment of energy, and because she never actually felt in control, she was continually exhausted. Her chronic pain was also the result of her inability to control others. By the time she arrived in Norm's office, she looked defeated. This woman could not cope with the inevitability of her children leaving home, yet she denied that she acted in anything but her children's best interests. In her own view, she was a supportive mother because she provided her children with a clean home, healthy food, and decent clothing, that she systematically strove to undermine their emotional development. In fact, she could not admit. Since conventional medical treatments had not helped her, Norm was considering an alternative approach that included psychotherapy, cranial stimulation through an electrical device, and color and light therapy. If she had used these techniques, I realized, she might have benefited for a week or maybe a month, but she would not heal completely until she gave up her pathological struggle for control. That afternoon, I saw that for an alternative therapy to succeed, the patient must have an internal concept of power, an ability to generate internal energy and emotional resources, such as a belief in his or her self-sufficiency. This woman had only an external concept of power, which she drew from an external source, her children. This patient could certainly go to psychotherapy sessions, but unless she confronted the truth about herself, she would only be chronicling her complaints for an hour each week. No actual healing would take place. As M. Scott Peck has pointed out in People of the Lie and The Road Less Traveled, seeing and admitting the truth about ourselves, about our role in creating our own problems, and about how we relate to others is vital for healing. Evaluating this woman gave me insight into the role of power in our lives and our energy systems. Power is at the root of the human experience. Our attitudes and belief patterns, whether positive or negative, are all visions of how we define, use, or do not use power. Not one of us is free from power issues. We may be trying to cope with the feelings of inadequacy or powerlessness, or we may be trying to maintain control over people or situations that we believe empower us, or we may be trying to maintain a sense of security, a synonym for power, in personal relationships. Many people who lose something that represents power to them, money or a job or a game, or who lose someone in whom their sense of self-power is vested, a spouse or lover, a parent or child, develop a disease. A relationship to power is at the core of our health. Consider the first principle that biography becomes biology, together with this second principle that personal power is necessary for health. Power mediates between our internal and external worlds, and as it does so, it communicates in a language of myth and symbol. Consider, for example, the most common symbol for power: money. When a person internalizes money as a symbol of power, its acquisition and control becomes symbolic of that person's health. When she acquires money, her biological system receives the signals that power is coming into her body. Her mind transmits the unconscious message, I have money, therefore I'm safe, I'm secure. I have power, and all is well. This positive message transmitted to the biological system generates health. Of course, making lots of money doesn't guarantee health, but poverty, powerlessness, and illness are undeniably linked. When you have trouble making money, or you suddenly lose money, your biological system may weaken. I recall one man who during the mid-1980s seemed to have the Midas touch. His company was increasingly successful, and he had the energy of 10 people. He worked late hours, socialized into the early morning, then showed up for work before anyone else. Always alert, cheerful, and on top of things. Then, in October 1987, the stock market crashed, and his company collapsed along with it. Within months, his health deteriorated. He developed migraines, then lower back pain, and finally a fairly serious bowel disorder. He could no longer tolerate his late hours or his social schedule, and he withdrew from all activities besides maneuvering the survival of his financial empire. This man was unaware that he had calibrated his health to money-making, but when he became ill, he saw the connection and the ability to lead a lifestyle that he had always dreamed about. When he lost his fortune, he lost his power, and in only a matter of weeks, his biology crashed too. Certainly the stress of recovering a business would weaken anyone, but this man had undergone just as much stress when his company was on the rise, and that type of stress had empowered him. Each of us has numerous power symbols, and each such symbol has a biological counterpart. The dentist with pancreatic cancer had a symbol for power, his job. But since he had grown to despise his job, he was losing power each day. The power drain created a biological response that continued until it had created a terminal disease. Our lives are structured around power symbols: money, authority, title, beauty, security. The people who fill our lives and the choices we make each moment are expressions and symbols of our personal power. We often hesitate to challenge a person who we believe hold more power than we do, and we frequently agree to things because we believe we haven't the power to refuse. In countless situations and relationships, the underlying dynamic at work is the negotiation of power, who has it, and how we can maintain our share of it. Learning the symbolic language of energy means learning to evaluate the dynamics of power in yourself and others. Energy information is always truthful. Although a person may verbally agree to something in public, his energy will state how he really feels, and his real feelings will find their way into some symbolic statement. Our biological and spiritual systems always seek to express truth, and they will always find a way to do so. You need to become conscious of what gives you power. Healing from my illness is facilitated by identifying your power symbols and your symbolic and physical relationship to those symbols, and heeding any messages your body and intuitions tell you. Are sending you about them. The third principle: you alone can help yourself heal. Energy medicine is a holistic philosophy that teaches I am responsible for the creation of my health. I therefore participated at some level in the creation of this illness. I can participate in the healing of this illness by healing myself, which means simultaneously healing my emotional, psychological, physical, and spiritual being. Healing and curing are not the same thing. A cure occurs when one has successfully controlled or abated the physical progression of an illness. Curing a physical illness, however, does not necessarily mean that the emotional and psychological stress that were part of the illness were also alleviated. In this case, it is highly possible and often probable that an illness will reoccur. The process of curing is passive. That is, the patient is inclined and give his or her authority over to the physician and prescribed treatment, instead of actively challenging the illness and reclaiming health. Healing, on the other hand, is an active and internal process that includes investigating one's attitudes, memories, and beliefs with the desire to release all negative patterns that prevent one's full emotional and spiritual recovery. This internal review inevitably leads one to review one's external circumstances in an effort to recreate one's life in a way that serves activation of will, the will to see and accept truths about one's life and how one has used one's energies, and the will to begin to use energy for the creation of love, self-esteem, and health. The language of conventional medicine sounds more military than that of energy medicine. The patient was attacked by a virus, or a substance contaminated the cell tissue, resulting in a malignancy. Conventional medical philosophy considers the patient an innocent or virtually powerless victim who has suffered an unprovoked attack. In a conventional medical treatment, the patient follows a program prescribed by the physician so that the responsibility of healing lies on the doctor. Whether the patient cooperates with his health provider is certainly noted during such a treatment, but his attitude is considered unimportant to the process. Drugs and surgery are to do most of the work. By contrast, in holistic therapies, the patient's willingness to participate fully in his own healing is necessary for its success. Holistic and conventional medicine take two different attitudes toward power, active and passive. The chemical treatments of conventional medicine require no conscious participation on the part of the patient, but a holistic technique like visualization is enhanced by an active, involved patient. An energy connection occurs, in other words, between the consciousness of the patient and the healing capacity of the therapy, and sometimes even the therapist. When a person is passive with an attitude of, just do it to me, he does not fully heal. He may recover, but he may never deal fully with the source of its illness. The mother with depression and chronic neck and back pain is an example of someone with only passive power. This kind of dependent person feels she must acquire power from her external environment and from or through someone else. Holistic and conventional medicine take two different attitudes towards power, active and passive. The chemical treatments of conventional medicine require no conscious participation on the part of the patient, but a holistic technique like visualization is enhanced by an active, involved patient. An energy connection occurs, in other words, between the consciousness of the patient and the healing capacity of the therapy, and sometimes even the therapist. When a person is passive, with an attitude of just do it to me, he does not fully heal. He may recover, but he may never fully deal with the source of his illness. Acquisitioners. The mother with depression and chronic neck and back pain is an example of someone with only passive power. This kind of dependent person feels she must acquire power from her external environment and from or through someone else. She thinks consciously or unconsciously, alone I am nothing. Such a person seeks to acquire power through money, social status, political, social, military, or religious authority, and relationships with influential people. She does not directly express her own needs, but becomes skilled at tolerating or manipulating unsatisfactory situations. In the human energy system, our individual interactions with our environment can be thought of symbolically as electromagnetic circuits. These circuits run through our bodies and connect us to external objects and other people. We are drawn to power objects or people or power targets so that we can draw their power into our system. Our connection with the power target, however, draws some power away from our own field and into the target. At first I thought of these energy circuits as symbolic, but I have come to believe that they are actually real pathways of energy. So often I hear people comment that they feel hooked on a person or an experience from their past. Some people remark that they feel drained after being with a certain person or in a particular environment. These common words, in fact, come closer than we may think to describing the interaction of our energy field with our environment. When people say they are hooked on someone or something in a negative way, we are over-identifying with an object or possession. They are unconsciously conducting an intuitive diagnosis. They are identifying how they are losing power. I call such people acquisitioners. The most extreme type of acquisitioner is the addict. Regardless of the type of addiction a person has, be it to drugs, alcohol, or the need to control others, their energy circuits are so thoroughly connected to the target that they no longer have the use of their own reason and ability. One case that tragically illustrates the energy consequences of an addiction came to my attention during a workshop in Denmark for people who were either HIV positive or had developed AIDS. A woman there named Anna had become HIV positive as a result of her occupation, prostitution. Anna had the demeanor of a little girl and was extremely petite. She also limped because 4 weeks before, several of her ribs had been broken by one of her clients. At one point during the workshop, I was discussing what a person needs to do in order to heal a serious illness. I mentioned that addictions such as tobacco, drugs, and alcohol detract from a person's healing process. During a break, Anna came to me and said, "But Caroline, how bad could it be to smoke only 2 cigarettes per day?" As I looked at her, I realized that if I were holding the cure for AIDS in my left hand and a cigarette in my right and said to her, pick the one you want, her mind would have chosen the cure for AIDS, but all her energy circuits would have gone directly to the cigarette. I cannot emphasize this point strongly enough. The targets to which acquisitioners connect their energy circuits are people or objects to which they have surrendered their power, specifically the power to control them. Anna's addiction to cigarettes maintained more authority over her than her desire to heal. Unaccustomed to making empowering choices for herself, she was tied into a pattern of releasing her energy into the hands of others, most often her pimp and her cigarettes, the 2 power targets that controlled her entirely. Healing was beyond her reach because her power now existed outside the boundaries of her physical body. Our minds cannot easily compare with our emotional needs. Anna knew very well that both her occupation and her addiction to cigarettes were hazardous to her health, but she still craved tobacco emotionally because she believed it relaxed her, and she remained involved with her pimp because she believed that he took care of her. Anna's mind had rationalized her emotional attachment, and it was trying to negotiate her healing process by proposing that 2 cigarettes could not possibly harm her health. Unable to pull away from her addictions, Anna was unable to regain her power to heal. It is not the mind, but our emotional needs that control attachment to our power targets. The famous adage, "The heart has reasons that reasons knows not of," captures perfectly this dynamic. Acquisitioners inevitably find using their intuition extremely difficult. So attached is their self-esteem to the opinion of their power target that they automatically negate any information that their own intuition transmits to them. Clear intuition requires the ability to respect your own impressions. If you need another person to validate your own impressions, you interfere tremendously with your ability to intuit. Since healing is non-negotiable, acquisitioners find healing a more formidable challenge than people who have a sense of active power. Healing is, above all, a solo task. No one can heal on behalf of another person. We can assist others, to be sure, but no one can, for instance, forgive someone on behalf of someone else. Nor can any of us cause someone to release the painful memories or experiences that he needs to release in order to heal. The very nature of passive power is power through attachments. It runs contrary to an acquisitioner's entire biology to release or detach himself from targets that are draining his energy. Acquisitioners are almost programmed for conventional medical treatment. This is not necessarily always negative. Conventional treatment is the most appropriate form of healing for them as long as they remain passive. Redirecting power. Most people who attend my workshops come because they realize they need to change their lives. Some are afraid to leave their partner or their job, while others are trying to find a way to live with a situation that is incompatible with their emotional needs. I can't begin to calculate the number of times people have said, "I think I was better off before I realized how unhappy I was." Once we make conscious our emotional needs, however, it's impossible to forget them. Once we become aware of the source of our unhappiness, we cannot expunge that awareness. We have to make choices. The ability to choose is an act of power, and the sensation of having active power is both thrilling and threatening, because it makes us want to change those parts of our lives that are no longer appropriate, and changing those parts inspires us to challenge other aspects of our lives that are not satisfactory. Changing our lives is often difficult because of our existing loyalties. Usually we learn about loyalty within our family structure and as a connection toward our family. Loyalty to oneself, however, is an entirely different virtue, and adhering to it can cause tremendous upheaval in a family. Becoming loyal to herself may, for instance, cause a woman to recognize that she can no longer remain within her marriage. Upon sharing this information with her husband, she will be told, "Think of the children." Her case is an extremely common example of group loyalty conflicting with loyalty to oneself. While living in an unsatisfactory situation, we may try for a while to honor the demands of group loyalty, and we may avoid thinking about our personal emotional needs. At some point, however, our emotional body becomes sufficiently empowered that the mind can no longer fool the heart. The unhappy wife will either end up in unceasing personal turmoil by remaining in the marriage, or she will pursue a divorce while filled with guilt that she has been disloyal to the group, her family. In truth, there's not many ways to successfully introduce your personal needs into a circumstance that was created before you realized what your personal needs were. Julie ended one of my workshops because she was suffering from serious ovarian and breast cancer. Her marriage was dysfunctional, and it had been for several years. She wanted to heal her cancer, but she lived with a man who treated her with total contempt, a pattern that had begun 2 years after they married. He frequently told Julie that he was repulsed by the very sight of her, in spite of the fact that she was an extremely attractive woman. To try to gain his approval, she starved herself and exercised constantly. She described herself as a master of manipulation, which she used to cope with her marriage, although her manipulation did not get her what she wanted. When Julie wanted attention from her husband, she would invent interesting stories about people she said she had met while shopping. One time she telephoned him at his office with a made-up story about how a man had tried to rape her while she was jogging. No matter what stories she fabricated, however, nothing seemed to ignite either his concern or his respect. Money was another issue between them. Although Julie's husband earned a very high salary, he kept her in a tight allowance, demanding that she account for every cent. In spite of his humiliation, Julie never considered getting a job to supplement her personal income, believing she had no marketable skills. Sexual activity had ceased after 2 years of marriage. Julie's efforts to keep this part of her marriage alive caused her further humiliation. After her diagnosis with cancer, her husband refused to sleep in the same bed with her. Her response to that rejection was to sleep on the floor of the doorway into the bedroom. Every morning, he would literally step over her on his way to the bathroom, occasionally spitting on her when she looked up at him, and asked for help. When asked why she did not leave him, Julie replied that she had never been able to take care of herself emotionally or financially, and now more than ever, she needed someone to take care of her. Ironically, whenever she spoke about her husband, a sort of drifty look would come over her face, almost as if she was under a spell. And she would say he was a genuinely caring man who was simply under a great deal of pressure from his business. He really loved her, she added. It was just that he had a difficult time showing affection. When I suggested to Julie that she see a psychotherapist, she said that her husband believed therapists did no one any good. She said she could not go to one. I also suggested that some measure of strength might return to her body if she ate foods that were good for her, including an intensive vitamin regimen with a healthy diet. Again, Julie replied that if her husband approved these suggestions, she would act on them. In energy terms, it signified that Julie developed cancer in her female system, first in her ovaries, then her breast. Her illness was a symbolic statement of her feelings of rejection as a woman. As you'll read in the next chapter, our sexual organs contain our biological energy, specifically that of our relationships to people, as well as our way of being in our external environments. Julie could not see herself as having any personal power because she saw her husband as a source of security. Her biology was constantly receiving powerlessness signals. Julie died within a year. Active power types are quite different from acquisitioners like Julie. They are self-motivators. They believe self-care is a priority, and their energy circuits are attached to awareness, strength, and emotional stamina. A self-motivator is able to do whatever is required to maintain the balance of body, mind, and soul. Like Julie, Joanne had a dysfunctional marriage and developed breast cancer. Although Joanne's marriage was not quite the emotional horror story Julie's was, it had its problems. Joanne's husband, Neil, kept company with several other women. Joanne knew about it, but tried to overlook it. In her attempt to live with his adultery, she started to attend workshops for empowering women. Through these workshops, she eventually saw that Neil's behavior was violating her emotional boundaries. Prior to the workshops, Joanne had never thought in terms of personal emotional boundaries. She had entered marriage, as many people do, with the idea that two people should become one emotional system. Joanne soon recognized that her breast cancer, which appeared in the area of the body associated with giving and nurturing, would heal only if she took steps to honor herself, to develop self-esteem. Increasingly, Joanne gained an internal image of herself as a strong individual. By thinking of herself as an individual, she began a relationship with herself that she had not previously considered possible. Since her concept of identity had always required a spouse, as Joanne came to recognize her own needs, she exercised her new inner authority by standing up to Neil and demanding he adhere to their marriage vows. He promised to change his behavior, but that promise lasted less than a month. Joanne finally realized that she could not change him, and that she herself had changed so much that she could no longer accept his emotional violations. If she were to heal her cancer, she had to remove herself from the situation that was ruining her health. She divorced Neil and recovered from her cancer. Support groups for people with illnesses often bring their members to new self-definition. By acknowledging their own needs and evaluating their lives accordingly, they admit that their present circumstances are neither acceptable to the person they are becoming nor conducive to their healing. They realize that they have to take steps to change. In the process of healing, they learn to detach themselves from objects or people who are drawing the strength right out of their bodies. The necessity of change makes healing a terrifying experience for many people. These individuals know, consciously or unconsciously, that unplugging their energy circuits from a power target is the same as saying goodbye to it. They enter into an unsettling limbo where they want simultaneously to unplug from their power target and to hang on to it. Some people end up trying to live in the two worlds simultaneously, not entirely inhabiting the one that no longer suits them, yet never quite moving on to the next either. Thus, it is that many people journey to the well of healing, but find, once they get there, that they cannot actually drink. Healing requires taking action. It is not a passive event. We are meant to draw on our inner resources, to find the material strength to leave behind our outmoded beliefs and behaviors, and to see ourselves in new healthy ways, to take up our beds and walk. Learning symbolic sight. In part 2, as I describe the power issues that are woven into our psyches and our biology, try to diagnose your own relationship with each of the 7 power centers of your body. Make yourself the subject of your first intuitive evaluation. In the process, you will find yourself becoming more aware of the extraordinary world that lies behind your eyes. Ultimately, you will learn symbolic sight, the ability to use your intuition to interpret the power symbols in your life. I offer the following guidelines as a beginning point. When a person seeks to see more, healing is inevitable, but you need an internal method of absorbing this information to make it real for you. First and foremost, focus your attention on learning to interpret your life's challenges symbolically. Find a meaning in them. Think and feel how they connect to your health. Bring attention every day to the challenges you face and how your mind and spirit respond to them. Observe what causes you to lose power and where you feel the loss. Evaluate the spiritual and biological activity that occurs as a consequence. Second, think of yourself at all times as an energy being, as well as a physical one. The energy part of yourself is the transmitter and recorder of all your thoughts and interactions. Keep in mind at all times that your biography becomes your biology. Develop the habit of evaluating the people, experiences, and information you allow into your life. Developing symbolic sight begins with intention. Consciously and regularly evaluate your interactions and their influences on your emotional and physical power. And remember that if you have a private agenda, that is, if you want to see things in a certain way, you will interfere with your reception of energy information. Third, conduct energy self-evaluations on a daily basis. After you become skilled at it, self-scanning will take only a few moments. To practice, use the model of the human energy system presented in Chapter 2 as a reference. Reflect on each power center for a minute or two in a quiet, objective way. Don't wait to become ill before you attend to health of your energy system. Learn to sense the stress accumulating in your energy field and take the steps to heal yourself at the energy level. Make self-evaluation a habit. Fourth, when you discover an energy leak, focus on only the essentials that can help you recover your energy. Always address the question, why am I losing power? In healing, any imbalance, whether it is energetic or physical, you must always involve both your mind and your heart. Always strive to see beyond the physical components of a crisis. Refer to each of the 7 sacred truths of energy, as introduced in Chapter 2. One or more of those truths will be involved in your stressful situation. Ask yourself which of those truths is symbolically represented here. For example, if you are in a crisis at work, you may want to refer to the sacred truth, honor oneself. It may well speak to the issues that are being played out in your life. By grabbing hold of one perception, you lift yourself out of the quicksand of an illusion. You get the spiritual or symbolic height you need to interpret your situation impersonally and to learn the power lesson that the situation holds for you. Spiritual instruction teaches us to keep our focus on ourselves, not in an egocentric way, but as a way of consciously managing our energy and power. So your 5th task is to learn what rather than who draws power from you. Understand that the person who seems to be drawing your energy is actually only a reflection of some part of yourself. For instance, if you are jealous of someone, the important issue for you is not that specific person, but the shadow side of your nature as it is reflected in that person. In effect, that person serves as your teacher. Concentrating on the person of whom you are jealous will not heal you. You will only be sent more and more teachers, each more intense than the previous one. Your task is to learn the lesson that the teacher has for you rather than to resent the teacher. When you erroneously conclude that the specific person is the cause of your feeling depleted, you are slipping into fear and blame. You need to refocus on your power center until you get an impression of what kind of power that person has in relation to you. Once you set your sights on the lesson rather than the teacher, you have achieved a significant benefit of symbolic sight. You see that truth being delivered to you through the challenge. 6th, simplify your requirements for healing. The requirements to heal in any illness are essentially the same. Think of the illness as a power disorder, almost like a technical malfunction. Once you identify which sacred truth applies to your situation, organize your internal healing process around learning from that truth. Combine your internal healing with your conventional medical treatment that is essential and stick to your program. Reach out for any support that you require and use that support appropriately. Remember that the task is to move through your wounds, not to live in them. Don't waste time by thinking, acting, or praying like a victim. Feeling victimized only adds to your illness, and should it become a full-time state of mind, it would qualify as an illness in itself. Do all that is necessary to support your physical body, such as taking the appropriate medicine, maintaining a daily exercise program, and eating properly. Simultaneously, do all that is necessary to support your energy body, such as releasing unfinished business and forgiving injuries from the past. Make whatever personal changes are necessary for healing to take place. Leave that stressful job or marriage, take up a meditation practice, or learn cross-country skiing. The specific changes you make are not the important point here. The point is to actually make the changes that healing requires. Talking does not heal. Taking action does. While it is essential to work at maintaining a positive attitude, whatever your illness, healing requires dedication and commitment. Visualization will not work if you practice it only once a week, and no one's body becomes fit from only one trip to the gym. Healing one's body or one's life challenges or developing symbolic sight requires daily practice and attention. Healing illness, in particular, may be a full-time occupation. Although you can simplify the steps required to accomplish the task. If you are using a complex healing package, that is several different therapies and therapists, several physicians, several herbal and vitamin programs, but are making little to no progress, you may actually be blocking your own healing. Perhaps becoming healthy in some way threatens you more than you realize. Perhaps you are unable to let go of something from the past, or perhaps becoming healthy would alter the balance of power between you and another person. Use your head in thinking about this, because obviously some illnesses are genuinely more serious than others, and the lack of healing does not always signal that you are blocking your healing process. But if 10 different therapies and therapists are not enough to bring some degree of healing into your life, then you need to consider the possibility of conscious or unconscious interference, or the very real possibility that your healing may include preparation to leave this physical life. 7th, simplify your spirituality. All my earthly studies of heaven have led me to the conclusion that heaven is not a complicated realm. Therefore, one's personal theology should not be complicated. Seek to believe only what heaven has issued as essential. For example, all circumstances can be changed in a moment, and all illness can be healed. The divine is not limited by human time, space, or physical concerns. Be consistent. Live what you believe. Change is constant. Every life goes through phases of difficult change as well as peace. Learn to go with the flow of change rather than try to stop change from occurring. Never look to another person to make you happy. Happiness is an internal, personal attitude, and responsibility. Life is essentially a learning experience. Every situation, challenge, and relationship contains some message worth learning or teaching to others. Positive energy works more effectively than negative energy in each and every situation. Live in the present moment and practice forgiveness of others. We gain nothing by believing that heaven thinks and acts in complex ways. It is far better and more effective to learn to think the way heaven does, in simple and eternal truths. In all likelihood, we have made our lives far more complex than they have to be. Achieving health, happiness, and an energy balance comes down to deciding to focus more on the positive than on the negative, and to live in a manner spiritually congruent with what we know is the truth. Making those two commitments alone is sufficient to allow the power contained within our divine biological system to influence the content and direction of our lives. We are all meant to learn the same truths and to allow our divinity to work within and through us. This is a simple task, though hardly an easy one. The settings and people in your lives are different, but the challenges they represent to us are identical, as are the influences that these challenges have upon our bodies and our spirits. The more we are able to learn this truth, the more we can develop symbolic sight, the ability to see through physical illusions and recognize the lessons being offered to us by life's challenges. Thank you for joining me for Chapter 1 of Anatomy of the Spirit by Caroline Myss. Be sure to keep an eye out for Chapter 2